Hello everybody, welcome to the first video of 2020. So last weekend we have just one wide release, and that is the horror movie The Grudge, which is a remake of a remake, or a reboot of a remake, starring John Cho. Let's see how that movie did at the box office. Alright, before we get to that movie, let's jump right into the box office top 10, which I'm sure will include The Grudge. Coming in at number 1 is Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. The final movie in, Episode 9, the final movie in the Skywalker saga, Rey and Kylo Ren, I believe, right? And this movie in its third weekend pulled in $33.7 million. Domestic gross so far is $451 million, and an additional $468 million overseas, for a worldwide total of $919 million. It's closing in at the $1 billion mark. Even though it will not make as much as Star Wars The Last Jedi, I mean, it's still doing pretty good. Reviews wise, The Rise of the Skywalker is not that great, 54% on the tomato meter and a B+ cinema score. So that's why it only got a $177 million opening. I mean, The Last Jedi, broke record when it opened, but I guess the reception from that movie affected this movie somewhat, right? With the lower opening and the lower take, even though it's still, like I say, pretty good. The budget for this movie is reported somewhere between $250 million to $300 million. So, high price budget, but $1 billion at the box office. It's still going on, but it'll definitely cross the $1 billion mark at some point. So all in all, it might be a letdown in terms of box office performance and reviews. But I guess, we can look forward to more Star Wars movies coming down the pipeline, focusing on new characters. Alright, number 2 is Dwayne Johnson's Jumanji, The Next Level, aka Jumanji 2. In its fourth weekend, it pulled in $26.5 million, drop off about 25% from the previous weekend. And let's see, domestic gross so far is $236 million, with an additional $374 million overseas, for a worldwide total of $610 million. I mean, hey, this is another successful Dwayne Johnson movie, right? The first movie did really well. I mean, it only had a $36 million opening, but it went on to gross $404 million domestically and $962 million worldwide. So, and the budget's only $90 million. And although the budget for this movie, for Jumanji 2, is $125 million, a bit higher, but it's pulling in $610 million so far, and still going. Reviews wise, Jumanji The Next Level is not that far off from the first movie. First movie had a 76% on the tomato meter. The Next Level had a 71% on the tomato meter and an A- cinema score. So with the reviews and the box office performance for The Next Level, we can expect more Jumanji movies coming along. Alright, number 3 is the movie Little Woman. In its second weekend, it pulled in about $13.6 million. Drop off is about 19% from the previous weekend, from its opening weekend. Domestic gross is about $60 million so far, and overseas it pulled in an additional $20 million, for a worldwide total of $80 million. This is a movie that I said, probably wouldn't do that well. Maybe 8 million, 8 days opening, right? But it had like a 17 million opening for the 3 days, so it surprised me. And this is one of the movies that this movie is actually well reviewed, at 95% on the tomato meter and an A- cinema score. So yeah, one of the surprise holdover from last year. Alright, coming to number 4 is the new movie from last weekend, and that is the horror movie The Grudge. This is a reboot of a remake, I believe, of the Japanese movie. It opened to $11.3 million, which is, I think, a pretty good opening for this movie. I think Sony was projecting this movie to have a softer opening, somewhere around 9 million, but the Thursday preview numbers of 1.8 million suggest that it could open higher, and it did. It opened to 11.3 million, and some estimates put it at around could open it as high as 15 million, right? But 11.3 million is actually a pretty good opening for this remake. Reviews wise, it's not that great. I mean, 17% on the tomato meter, even for horror movies, it's actually pretty bad, and a F cinema score. So people who watch this movie on opening weekend usually are horror fans, and if they gave this movie an F, it's pretty bad. Expect a huge drop off in the second weekend. All right, number 3 is Frozen 2. This is a movie that still keep on going. It pulled in 11.3 million in its seventh weekend, drop off of about 33% from the previous weekend. And domestic gross so far is 450 million, with an additional 875 million overseas for a worldwide total of 1.3 billion. All right, number 6 is the animation Spies in Disguise. In the second weekend, it pulled in about 10 million, drop off about 25% from its opening weekend. Domestic gross, let's see, is about 47 million and additional 42 million overseas for a worldwide total of 88 or 89 million. I'm surprised by the review for this movie. I thought it would be lower, but it actually had a 76% on the tomato meter and a minus cinema score. This is a movie that I say could probably open somewhere, in the 15 million range 3 days. It actually, opened a bit lower, about 13 million. So it's actually about where I had this movie. All right, number 7 is the thriller comedy Knives Out, starring James Bond, Daniel Craig, Chris Evans, Ana de Armas, Jamie Lee Curtis, etc. It's a star-studded cast. In the 6th weekend, it pulled in about 9 million. Drop-offs about, it's pretty low, about 9% from the previous weekend. And domestic gross is 130 million, and overseas, it pulled in an additional 117 million for a worldwide total of 247 million. The budget for this movie is actually 40 million, so it's at pretty good returns. And I heard they're making a sequel to this movie, which is not that surprising considering the box office performance. All right, number 8 is Uncut Gems, a movie starring Adam Sandler as this jeweler who got in, mixed in with a bad crowd, right? And it also stars Kevin Garnett, ex-NBA player. It's directed by Benny Safdie and Josh Safdie. I believe they're brothers. Very well reviewed, the movie, 92% on the tomato meter, but somehow it has C+ cinema scores. So there's a disagreement there from professional critics and the audience. So in its 4th weekend, it pulled in about 7.8 million, drop off about 18% from the previous weekend, and domestic gross is about 37 million, hasn't opened overseas yet. So the box office is about 37 million for Uncut Gems. All right, number 9 is Bombshell, a movie about what happens during, the Roger Ailes era, at Fox News, where a woman accuses Roger Ailes of creating this hostile work environment and other deeds. Directed by Jay Roach, starring Margot Robbie, Charlize Theron, Alice Eve, Nicole Kidman, and others. Reviews-wise, it's okay, only 67% on the tomato meter. In its 4th weekend, it pulled in about 4 million. Drop of about 15 million from the previous weekend. Domestic gross is about 25 million. Open a little bit overseas, only 477k overseas for a worldwide total about 25 million. So this is one of those movies that's going for an award play, but it doesn't seem like it's hitting it out of the ballpark at the box office nor the reviews. All right, number 10 is, I guess, The Bomb from last year, 2019, that opened around Christmas time, I believe. And the musical turned movie Cats. It pulled in 2.6 million in its 3rd weekend, drop off about 46%. As you can see, it's a huge drop off. It's one of these movies with a huge drop off. So domestic growth so far is about 25 million, with an additional 32 million from overseas for a worldwide total of about 57 million. This movie costs about 95 million, and I read that this movie is going to lose about 70-some million after it's all said and done, because it bombed at the domestic box office, and while it did a little bit better overseas, it's not going to recoup that budget after advertising, etc. All right, that's it for the box office top 10. Let's move on to the new releases this weekend. And we are going to have 4, after the New Year's holiday break. The studios decided to, release a slew of movies into theaters this weekend. We're going to have 1917, a World War I movie directed by Sam Mendes. It's expanding, right? Having its wide release this weekend. And then the based on a true story, Just Mercy. And then Like a Boss comedy starring Tiffany Haddish, and the underwater thriller titled Underwater. All right, let's start off with 1917. As the title suggests, it's a World War I movie that focuses on 2 British soldiers who's tasked to deliver a message to a battalion on the front lines, asking them to pull back or else they're going to fall into this trap. The twist is in that battalion, the brother of one of the soldiers is there. It's well reviewed and 90% on the tomato meter. It won Golden Globe for Best Picture. It happened this weekend, I believe. I don't follow the Golden Globes that closely, but I believe it won Best Picture for Golden Globe drama, I believe. It stars George McKay and Dean Charles Chapman as the 2 soldiers. It looks really good. Again, like I said, well reviewed, but is it gonna translate to the box office? Remember, this is a time when we're very tense right now. Our president killed an Iraqi general, and there's a possibility of war breaking out anytime soon, right? And this is a war movie, so we have to take that into account. Still, I think this movie is gonna get a bump from the Golden Globes. Real life might not intrude yet. I think we're gonna get a bump from the Golden Globes. So I think 1917 is probably gonna have an opening somewhere in the 20 to 25 million range. All right, up next is Just Mercy, starring Michael B. Jordan, Jamie Foxx, Brie Larson, and others. This is based on a true story about a Harvard-educated lawyer who went to Alabama after graduation to fight for inmates on death row. And Jordan plays that lawyer, and Foxx is one of the inmates. This movie opened during, I guess, Christmas last year to qualify for, any awards coming up, and it's getting its wide release this weekend. I can see this movie having a bigger opening than my projection. I projected this movie to open somewhere in the 5 million range because this is not the type of story that will garner a huge audience. It's based on a true story, and it's not one of these exciting adventure movies, action movies, but I could be wrong. Again, like I said, this movie is targeted toward the African American audience, and they tend to turn out for this movie. Look at the movie, Harriet Tubman, right? Harriet. That movie I projected it to open lower because I thought, people might not turn out for this because it's kind of like a history lesson, but I was proven wrong. It opened very well and it performed well. This could be one of those movies that, perform well because, the audience turn out for this one. But I'm going to go conservative for this 5 million opening, but I wouldn't be surprised if it opened higher, in the 10 to 15 million if people turn out for this one. All right, up next is the comedy Like a Boss, starring Tiffany Haddish, Rose Byrne, and Selma Hayek. Haddish and Burns are partners in a makeup company that's struggling. They're in debt, and Hayek's character, company, who owns a big kind of cosmetic company, wants to buy them out, and they find out that she's there to steal their ideas, and they want to take their company back. Doesn't have reviews on Rotten Tomatoes yet. This is one of these R-rated comedies about women behaving badly, smoking weed, etc., doing things that normal people shouldn't do, but they did anyway. And awful laughs, of course. And these movies usually open pretty well as a comedy. So I think this movie is probably going to open somewhere in the 10 to 15 million range, but I wouldn't be surprised if it opens somewhere, 15 to 20. But going with 10 to 15 because, hey, it's the week after New Year's. It's going to be a week. All right, finally, we have Underwater. This movie stars Kristen Stewart, T.J. Miller, Vincent Cassell, James Gallagher Jr. Stewart plays one of the people who works in an underwater lab, but then an earthquake kind of knocked everything out of whack, right? They have to get out or else, they're going to die, be trapped underwater. Yeah, it's one of these movies. Unfortunately, this movie stars Kristen Stewart, who has proven not to be a box office draw. Look at the recent Charlie's Angel remake, right? So Kristen Stewart in Underwater, and the other people in this movie, the name that I recognize most is probably Vincent Cassel. So it's not a star-studded cast. Like I said, Stewart has proven that she's not a box office draw, and it could be box office poison, right? People might avoid the movie because she's in it. So I think Underwater could probably open somewhere in the 5 to 8 million range this weekend. Alright, that's it for this week's video. Tune in next time. So until then, take care. Bye bye.